one of the important flagship projects that we are looking at is doing a cancer hospital jointly in Kenya. And both Prime Ministers agreed that this was something we should take forward. Prime Minister also then requested for Japan's support for a new initiative that he will launch later this year, and this is the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. He explained very briefly what this initiative was, and then he suggested that Japan's support, because of its experience, that Japan's support would be important for this important new initiative that Prime Minister and India are preparing to launch. So he sought Japan's assistance and support in this regard. Both of them then agreed that prior to his visit to India later in the year, a number of important meetings would take place, but the most important would be the first 2+2 ministerial meeting. This is a new format which was agreed to when Prime Minister visited Japan last year, in which the foreign affairs and defense ministers of the two countries will meet together and discuss issues relating to defense, foreign policy and security. So this meeting, it has been decided, will be held before the annual summit. The dates, of course, are still, that will be discussed through diplomatic channels. Finally, of course, they both observed that they would be meeting again tomorrow morning in the context of a trilateral meeting between Japan, India and the United States. And there was a brief discussion on how the Indo-Pacific Initiative, which is an important initiative which all three countries are separately pursuing and also discussing together, could be given a further fillip as part of this initiative. So these were the broad areas of discussion. It was a very warm meeting. The atmosphere was very positive. The Prime Minister of Japan is looking forward to his visit to India, and of course Prime Minister is looking forward to participating in the G20 meeting. So I will stop here now. Manish.
Thank you, sir. I'll just take maybe one or two questions. Siddhant?
Sir, was connectivity discussed? Because both Japan and India are keen to engage on connectivity, and of course third country projects. You talked about Kenya. We are also working in Sri Lanka. So can you just give us the nitty-gritties or what happened actually?
Yeah. So because of time constraints, obviously detailed discussions could not take place, but on a number of at a number of points the connectivity issue was touched upon. The first, of course, is, as I explained, is the Act East Forum, which is trying to connect the northeastern part of India to Bangladesh and Myanmar as well. The second was, as I mentioned, both leaders felt that we should jointly do projects in third countries in the neighborhood. Countries were not identified, but you have correctly mentioned that one of them is Sri Lanka. And we would certainly like to see if we can do some work with them in countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar. Those are still under discussion, and obviously there was no specific discussion at this meeting. Lastly, of course, the issue of the Indo-Pacific is the issue of connectivity. It is a seamless connectivity of the two major oceans, which collectively taken together is where the global economic center is moved. So in all these areas, I think a direction was set. It is now up to the officials of the two countries to bring that together.
Yes, please.
सर, ये प्रधानमंत्री का एक जो न्यू इनिशिएटिव की बात है, डिजास्टर रेजिलिएंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर, तो ये किस तरह का, क्या ये भारत के लिए या सबके लिए बात हो रही है, और किस तरह का सपोर्ट जापान से मांगा गया?
This is a new initiative that India is looking at launching. It is essentially a loose virtual coalition of countries which have capacity in handling post-disaster infrastructure development. That capacity could be financial, it could be human resources, it could be experience, or it could be all of them together. Essentially, the thinking behind this is that every time a major disaster occurs, immediate relief and rehabilitation is given, and thereafter small countries, vulnerable countries and developing countries are left to fend for themselves, where it means rebuilding the infrastructure, without which the economy can never regain its position. And the Prime Minister's view is that since there are capacities all over the world, is it not possible for us to link these capacities together so that if a disaster occurs in any country, the leadership and government of that country understands whom to go to and how to access it, rather than beginning from scratch. This is a space which has not been filled by anybody yet. It does not compete with UN organizations which are in relief or rehabilitation, because this is infrastructure building back better. And therefore, Prime Minister felt that this is an area in which India, with its experience, with its capacity to handle disasters, can take a lead in. We will be approaching this was briefly flagged at the G20 in Argentina. And therefore Prime Minister in that context approached Japan. We will be approaching other leaders as Prime Minister meets them during the summit. And the intention is actually to launch this sometime later in the year. Precise details will obviously be given later.
Ji, Akhilesh ji.
Prime Minister Abe was in Iran recently, and suppose that he was talking to Iran. So, could you share anything with Prime Minister Narendra Modi that what can be the solution of Iran situation?
There was no discussion on Iran, Akhilesh ji, during the conversation.
Thank you. This concludes the special briefing. Thank you, sir, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you. I will be doing regular briefings as and when these bilateral meetings take place and so on. So I look forward to seeing you all. Thank you.